G'day everyone, I'm the man called Kemosabe, the man with the plan from the land down under, and this is my video on the Punisher's new costume, or more specifically his new symbol. You know, for a character so grounded in reality as much as anyone who exists alongside Spider-Man and the Avengers can be, Punisher has had some real odd twists and turns, some strange changes to his status quo. He's been turned into a black man, replaced by a woman more than once, had his face scarred up and been killed off and returned to life multiple times. He's been an angelic assassin and Frankenstein's monster. He's been Captain America and Iron Man. But what thing do these gimmicks all have in common? They all ended, and Frank reverted back to the core of his character. Will this time be any different? I think it will, at least for a while, and that's because of the motivation behind this particular change. The current controversy is Frank's new symbol, an odd horned skull that is vaguely visually Asiatic, or maybe even demonic. It's clumsy, less iconic and original than the OG symbol, and likely to be forgotten as soon as it's gone from the current issues. My first reaction to this change was weary anger, because I only saw a cropped panel of Frank with his new symbol. It was out of context, it made no sense to me. It turns out this symbol is part of a larger change, a bold new direction as Marvel likes to say. It appears Frank has been pipped to head up the Hand Ninja Clan, or at least join it, like Elektra, Daredevil and Wolverine have before him. And you guys said Marvel is no longer the house of ideas. They have plenty of ideas, it's the same few ideas over and over again ad nauseum. As a member of the Hand, Frank appears to be eschewing guns of any sort, and limiting his weapon choice to melee weapons. But I imagine that he'll still use shurikens and bows and arrows, weapons the Hand has utilised for decades in comics. So it's not a melee weapon versus ranged weapon thing, it's specifically a gun thing. Frank running with the Hand is a story that's been done before, just without the Punisher. So why are they doing it now? There's really just one big reason that I can see, but some other factors feed into that. Now, few people would deny that Garth Ennis is one of the greatest Punisher writers of all time. He wrote the lauded Welcome Back Frank storyline that undid one of the Punisher's most bizarre storylines, where he died and became a vengeful angel using energy guns to kill the enemies of heaven. After that cartoonishly violent, over-the-top run that had many of its aspects lifted for the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, Ennis embarked on probably the most ambitious and character-defining Punisher storyline of all time. Punisher Max, a gritty, violent, raw Punisher like we'd never seen before, not even in Ennis's own books. The biggest difference about this Punisher, though, is he existed in a world without superheroes or superpowers of any sort. He was the original Punisher, a Nam vet with decades of intense combat experience and a war that raged over 40 years, resulting in a body count in the thousands. This Punisher was insanely popular, and the Max run is considered some of the best Punisher comics of all time. If not the best. For the street-level stories to matter, and for the very human stakes to hit home, this Punisher needed to be apart from a world where a Kree invasion could happen on any given Sunday. What to do then? How do they explain the disappearance of the Punisher in the 616 universe? Marvel decided there would then be two Punishers, Ennis's aging Nam veteran apex predator, and a newer Punisher, a combatant in modern conflicts, as much a secret agent Spec Ops type as Sam Fisher or Solid Snake. Both these Punishers shared the origin of a murdered family, spurring them into a war on crime, but this newer Punisher lacked the impact, history and gravitas of the original. The original Punisher was a veteran of one of the most painful, violent and poorly handled conflicts in America's history. There is a mythology around Nam. It has a special place in the country's collective identity. It's the era of Deer Hunter, of Death Wish. It's Taxi Driver and Apocalypse Now and Rambo and Delta Force, and a whole slew of action movies and action stars that defined Hollywood and America, at least for a generation or two. What's Desert Storm then? What is Frank being a highly skilled stealth assassin? What impact does that have? Little to none. And that's the impact New Punisher had. Marvel didn't know what to do with him, and as a result he had some odd storylines, most of which seemed to be reworks of stuff that was already done, only now it was being done worse, without the incredible art and punchy dialogue of old-school Punisher comics. New Punisher aped Suicide Run. He lost an eye, there was something about a Lady Punisher in there, which has been done at least twice that I can remember. He turned into Frankenstein's monster and then back again because of a magic gem. Don't ask. He stole a suit of War Machine armour. None of it really mattered. Probably the biggest thing New Punisher ever did was get beat up by Captain America in Civil War. People talk about bending a character too far, until they break. It didn't take long for this Punisher to break. Without the decades of classic storylines, without the very firm, well-documented origin interwoven with the mythology and imagery of the Vietnam War, there was little substance to this character, and he folded in short order. He was one more grizzled, bearded operator operating operationally, and that didn't resonate with the fans. Most people don't know about this Punisher schism. They know John Bernthal or maybe Thomas Jane. If you're old enough to remember Dolph Lundgren, you probably know why New Punisher isn't really the Punisher. Garth Ennis once semi-famously wrote that Frank is a bad guy and shouldn't be idolised or looked up to. His methods, his actions, his results are not something to be desired or replicated. Ennis has certainly spent enough time in Frank's head showing us that he chose this life, he chooses it every day and will continue to choose it. Even when he's given a way out, Punisher always chooses the life again. Ennis once hinted that if all the drug dealers and criminals in the world were somehow killed, Frank would turn his rage on regular folks. When the guilty are dead, the innocent start looking real guilty, with no one else for comparison. But despite Ennis's best efforts, people do idolise the Punisher. I would wager a whole lot of people have thought at some time or another that some bad guy, some real scumbag who hurts and cheats people that they know or have seen on the news should just catch a bullet. And no one does it better than the Punisher. Well, and this guy, but he's had a big head start. Something that was prominent in Ennis's run on Punisher that I don't remember so well in older issues is how the police were portrayed as low-key loving the Punisher. You see, he did their work for them. Anyone who managed to bribe a judge or intimidate a jury was likely to get a visit from the big man with a skull on his chest. It was a rare cop in these stories who wasn't cynical enough to think criminals needed to be brought to justice under the law, who thought that the system worked well enough not to need a Punisher out there dropping bodies. Somehow, at some point, that love of the character, of what he did and what he stood for, seeped from the comics into, from what I can tell, first the armed forces, then the police. There have been articles for years now about how dangerous it is for these armed men and women to idolise the Punisher. One of Punisher's original creators, Jerry Conway, came out and disavowed the whole thing and said he wished he'd never made the Punisher at all. Then he said he was going to give back all the royalty checks he got from the character's appearances in other media. No, he didn't do that, don't be silly. Garth Ennis or Mike Barron's contribution to the Punisher's mythos are far more significant than Conway's ever will be. As America got more polarised, more left versus right, white versus black, upper versus lower class, blue versus red, as ACAB became a battle cry and back the blue/thin blue line opposed it, the Punisher skull imagery made its way into what the media likes to term alt-right paraphernalia. Was that adoption of imagery an indictment of the times, or was it just that Punisher, at least during the war, killed communists? Then January 6th, one of the brightest days in US history, if you know what I mean, happened. After the smoke cleared, no one wanted to talk about what really happened. The MSN set the agreed-upon narrative. It was an insurrection that killed people, and some of the people on the side of the people who killed people were seen wearing patches and helmets with a Punisher skull on it. Conway was spinning in his grave. "I'm not dead." "Shut up, Conway." The literal Nazis had appropriated the Punisher imagery, and now people were dead because of it. There had already been a slew of articles about how Punisher was problematic. In a media world where the Second Amendment and gun ownership was literally Hitler, Punisher was always a problem who glorified guns, violence, and vigilantism. But now Trump supporters, the literal worst people on earth, had been photographed wearing the stuff. Marvel has been looking for a solution to the Punisher problem ever since. New Punisher doesn't sell well. I'm surprised they didn't just kill him off. But why kill a problematic character when you can neuter him, change him until he's barely recognisable and get so many articles and YouTube videos and clickbait editorials created about it? Costume changes have always been cheap hype for comic book characters. This is no exception. It generates outrage bucks. Was it Quesada or Didio that said an outraged fan will buy the comic to complain about it? I don't think that's as true today as it was when it was said, but I do think it is still at least partway true. Ultimately, I don't think this particular change will be the long-term change. I think it's cheap clicks and outrage purchases, a chance for a new #1 with a bunch of alternate covers, a way for people who want to like the Punisher but get triggered by the fact that he has trigger discipline to buy his books guilt-free. Killing someone with swords and axes is somehow better, more moral, and less fascist than with a gun. When the January 6th stuff dies down, I think New Punisher will revert to his not-so-old self again. New Punisher has been gimmick after gimmick after gimmick for years now. This is another gimmick and a long line of gimmicks. The only thing we can't predict right now is what the next gimmick will be, because you know there will be one. Whatever it is, it'll be something that dilutes the character further, that vilifies him worse than Ennis ever did. Punisher is an exceptionally simple character, hard to get wrong unless that's your goal. When the smoke from this outrage clears, this Punisher will be saddled with another new gimmick. This run of him being part of the Hand Ninja Clan won't even have the longevity of Superior Spider-Man or even Electric Blue Superman. Marvel has a chance right now to get rid of New Punisher altogether, to remove that connection to January 6th, Trump, and all that stuff they have to lie about to actually make it look bad to the normies. But they always had that opportunity. They could have publicly cancelled the Punisher as a character on January 7th and made a huge deal about it, scoring an untold number of woke points with the people who don't actually buy Punisher comics. So why didn't they? There's been talk lately about a government scheme that rewards corporations for their wokeness, to the point that they can afford to lose money on every product they produce and still keep the board members happy. I don't know about all that, but it's clear that the people at the very top of these corporations don't really care about the woke. Wokeness has a ceiling. At some point, be it editor, director, chairman, board member, CFO, CEO, the wokeness doesn't matter and money does. Whoever had the power to cancel Punisher could have done it at any time between January 6th and now, but they didn't. They instead allowed him to continue, a problematic mouthpiece for their dogma, stripping him of everything that made him the Punisher along the way. He's become propaganda, and that's even worse and more destructive for the character than all the goofy flash in the pan gimmicks he's been saddled with over the years. Shogun's Skull logo Ninja Punisher will last 6 months, tops, before he's rebooted, rebranded, further removed from the core of who he was supposed to be. The OG Punisher will languish in oblivion until Ennis needs Guinness money and he pumps out another canonically unrelated miniseries. New Punisher will undergo some other sort of change as meaningless and easily forgettable as this ugly, poorly designed Skull logo. So don't be mad at this new logo, it won't even be around by the next season. Be mad at the editorial with an agenda, the one that took an incredible pure character with an almost unlimited storytelling potential, a character that has tapped into the zeitgeist for 40 years, and effectively neutered him. Be mad not for the latest costume change, be mad that the Punisher is now propaganda for the very people that never wanted him in the first place.